Hello, I'm W.T. Edmondson, and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, I'm pleased to have the honor to welcome Dr. Michael Middleton, Interim President of Lincoln University, to the SAC. Thank you for accepting our invitation.
Thanks for having me.
Well, Dr. Middleton earned his bachelor degree in political science from the University of Missouri in 1968, earned a law degree from the University of Missouri Law School in 1971. Dr. Middleton has a stellar career in the legal profession, starting out in Washington, D.C., in numerous positions, and he returned to Missouri to take on a position in EEOC in St. Louis. In 1985, he made history by returning to his alma mater and being the first time African-American professor within the law school. He served as interim vice provost for minority affairs and faculty development and retired in August 2015 as deputy chancellor. In November 2015, the University of Missouri Board of Curators appointed Dr. Middleton as interim president of the full campus system following a semester of turmoil at the institution. I believe that Dr. Middleton is the ideal candidate for this position as interim president for Lincoln University, and now the interim president for the university. The goal of this interview, of course, is to introduce Dr. Middleton to our viewing audience and also to alumni throughout the country who will be able to view this program on YouTube. So again, welcome to Focus.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Well, let's get right into our questions. We have shared with our audience your education and your professional background. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the influences that made you who you are.
Wow. Well, the influences have been basically my family, my father, my mother, and their families. Grew up in Mississippi, Jackson, Mississippi, in the 50s. So I was actively involved in the civil rights movement in Mississippi. I was in Jackson for Freedom Summer. I was active with the NAACP, the youth group at the time. I was young then. But my aunts and uncles were active with the local branch. I knew Medgar Evers, for example, and Aaron Henry, and Fannie Lou Hamer, people like that. As a child, they were the adults leading things. So I developed a serious interest in civil rights. So I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer. Now, the other side of me is that my father was a chaplain in the military. He's an Episcopal priest, had a church in Vicksburg and in Jackson that his father and father's father had been involved in establishing back in the 1800s. So I've got this fairly deep roots in the church. So I had a lot of mixed feelings and perspectives on some of the issues. I didn't want to be a minister, so I became a lawyer. I didn't want to be out in the street running from police dogs and fire hoses, so I became a lawyer. So I think I was groomed to work in the civil rights area. I came to college, to Mizzou, basically because my father was stationed at Fort Leonard Wood when I was at that age. I went to Waynesville High School, which is right outside of Fort Leonard Wood, and came to Mizzou because it was the state school. My two older brothers had gone to Lincoln because we were living here at the time. They opted for Lincoln instead of Mizzou. I think it was because at the time, this was probably in the late 50s, early 60s, Lincoln was the place for an African American student to go. By the time I finished high school in '64, the University of Missouri had opened its doors a bit more than they had been previously. And I opted to come to Mizzou, mainly because I didn't want to try to follow in my brother's footsteps at Lincoln. So I did Mizzou, and Mizzou was good to me. I finished. I had a music scholarship. I had some talent in music as well, but didn't see the career I wanted in music because I wanted to be a lawyer. So I ended up majoring in political science, as you've mentioned. Got my degree, went to law school. Got my dream job right out of law school as a trial attorney at the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, which was the only federal agency set up to bring the weight of the federal government to the civil rights movement. I litigated a number of national cases for the 5 or so years I was there. And then I just moved in various basically management positions in Washington at HEW, EEOC, Department of Education, all around civil rights enforcement in those agencies. Until I was offered a position at the law school as a professor of law. So I figured I'd give that a try, and taught law for 12 or 13 years at Mizzou. Moved into administration at Mizzou as a vice provost, and then as deputy chancellor about a year later. I was deputy chancellor there for 17 years. But all of it was around trying to advance minoritized people in whatever I was doing. I mean, my passion has always been the marginalization of people in a society and why that happens and how to correct it. So that's who I am, and that's why I am who I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, you answered part of the question that was going to follow, was that basically but how you decided to venture into education. Were you just offered a job, or did you actually decide that you wanted to enter into the education arena?
Well, education had always been ingrained in me as important. I mean, my parents were both well-educated, advanced degrees. All their brothers and sisters, well-educated, advanced degrees. So I knew that education was important, and when I was given the opportunity to be an educator formally as a law professor, it just seemed an interesting thing to do. I mean, litigating at the level that I was at is a exhausting enterprise, and I needed to do something differently. You know, Washington was a difficult place to raise my 3 young children. I remembered Columbia and the University of Missouri as being pleasant places. And I thought a job as a professor of law, the first African-American professor of law, was an attractive option to the rat race I was on. And, you know, the politics of things just made it wise for me at that time to get out of Washington and do something different. Ironically, after that administration changed, and I was asked to come back to Washington and pick up where I had left off, essentially. And though it was an attractive offer, I had pretty much set roots in Columbia at the law school and turned that down, and figured that I could do, I could contribute to the movement writ large outside of litigation, but through education. And I think I've done a fairly decent job of that as well. So, you know,
Talking about coming to Columbia, how did you, I'm sure you had to meet Elliott Battle.
Oh yeah, Elliott and I were very, very good friends.
Yeah.
He was in fact a mentor of mine.
Yeah.
When I was a student in Columbia, I'm an Alpha. Elliott was, in fact, I was the charter president of Zeta Alpha chapter in Columbia, the undergrad chapter there. We formed it. Elliott was our advisor. So Elliott and I go back a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very influential guy.
Yes, he is.
Yeah. We can't have this conversation without taking you back to your experience in coming into, I'm sure, somewhat of a stressful environment there at the University of Missouri, during your term there as interim president. Going in, what were your mission and goals going into the interim position of the full campus system?
As president?
Yes.
Well, I think I had, I'm trying to recall, I think I had three major objectives that the board set out for me. One was to restore trust and confidence in the university. The university was suffering a lot of criticism about the way things fell apart administratively as a result of the student protests that we were experiencing. And people were wondering, you know, who's in charge, who's running the university. So I needed to work on restoring trust and confidence, both with the legislature and alums and all the constituents. The university had a decent strategic plan, so I was asked to try to maintain progress on some of the major initiatives in that strategic plan. And I set one for myself, which the board agreed with, and that was to make the university system a national model of dealing with the diversity issues. And you know, when you're given lemons, make lemonade. Rather than being defensive or denying the situation that we had, I was determined to make the best of it and make it better and respond to the students' concerns and set up systems at the university that would be sustainable in the future, that would handle the kinds of issues of marginalization and that kids were experiencing on the campus. So those are basically my three goals. Yeah.
How did your interest in becoming interim president here at Lincoln University come about?
I got a call from a former student of mine who happens to be the chairman of the board of Lincoln's Board of Curators, Marvin Tier. I don't know if Marvin came up with the idea, but he had talked to the board about the possibility of my coming on. At least that's the way he brought it to me. Mm-hmm. And they all agreed that I would be an ideal person to serve in the interim position. So, you know, when you get a former student who you really like and coming to you asking for your help, and he tells you that his board is in agreement, it's not hard to say yes. Mm-hmm. Plus, you know, as I told you earlier, I have two brothers and two brothers-in-law who are Lincoln alums, and I know a bit about Lincoln's history and what it's done for people. And I've never worked at an HBCU, and I was always intrigued at having the opportunity to do that. So there are a number of things connecting me to Lincoln or to the whole HBCU network that attracted me.
How did your experience of being interim at the University of Missouri system, you think, prepared you for this interim position?
Well, only in that for this one I had done it before. You know, I had not been the president. I had not been the head person at a university, although I was number 2 for 17 years on the Columbia campus. I worked very, very closely with 3 chancellors at the University of Missouri in Columbia. So I was familiar with most of the issues one had to deal with and some of the balancing that has to be done. But the job of the university system, you know, made me the man. Mm-hmm. There's a little difference in being the chief advisor to the man and being the man.
Right.
So having the opportunity to do that at the system just familiarized me with some of the nuances involved in being the president rather than the president's advisor. Mm. So I was able to see some things that I hadn't been intimately involved with when I was on campus. I got much more involved in budget issues and board relations and some of the political legislative relations. I got hands-on experience with that at the system that I didn't have personal experience with when I was on the Columbia campus. Yeah.
What were your expressed mission and goals coming into this position?
Well, you know, pretty similar to the ones I had when I came into the position at the system. You know, Lincoln had just gone through some serious budget cuts, lost some people, lost some programs. The president had announced his departure. He had a few senior staff people who he was taking with him, Kevin Rome to Fisk. And faculty and staff were a bit shaken, a bit concerned about the future. So there's a need to reassure people that the world is not ending, that Lincoln's been here for 151 years and it will be here for 151 more at least if we pull ourselves together and get the job done. And I'm trying to get that message out. I have met with most of the staff. I've been on a sort of a listening tour. I'll meet with the faculty when they get here in a couple of weeks. My goal is to bring people together around Lincoln and figure out how we can move this ball forward, despite the budget difficulties we have. Taking care of our students, improving on the metrics that everyone looks at in terms of our performance, and find more efficient ways to do what we do. It doesn't appear that there's much more money coming in. I'd like to see our advancement efforts, our development efforts get a little bit more aggressive so we can get some alumni support, private donations to fund some things. But fundamentally, I want to settle things down, much like I was asked to do at the Missouri system.
Having that set down with Dr. Ohn before he left, what were the tenor of that conversation, and what do you think came out of that conversation?
Well, Dr. Ohn gave me a good sense of some of the issues that he was working on. I think he was certainly moving in the right direction on things. He did a great deal in terms of community and university relations, several partnerships with the city of Jefferson. He was really connecting with alums around the country, which would certainly help with development activities. And he kind of sort of briefed me on those activities. He also had made some very tough decisions in light of that budget situation to terminate a couple of programs and eliminate some positions. So, which did cause some angst amongst a lot of people involved with those programs that were closed, and certainly those involved in being laid off. But and he explained to me the necessity of making those decisions. Those kinds of decisions are always very, very difficult, and it's really a matter of what the leader determines to be the appropriate way to go, because there are any number of ways to cut 40 positions, you know. So he did that before I came, and I accept that, and we are now ready to move forward. There are a few areas where folks want to reinstate some things. I'm considering those suggestions, and we may do some things around, you know, but nothing huge. I mean, the budget situation is real, and
Right.
everybody can't have their stuff back. But Kevin was very serious guy. You know, the opportunity to go to Fisk, which is you know, one of our better known HBCUs in the country, was one he simply couldn't turn down. So Kevin's gone.
Yeah. Upon your arrival, what did you identify as the initial challenge that you had to address?
Morale amongst the faculty and staff. For example, one of the first things I heard was that the faculty had voted to unionize. That's fairly unusual at a university, or a newer development in the history of universities. And I've often wondered where we failed in utilizing the shared governance that is characteristic of universities and their faculties, so much so that the faculty chose to bring in an outside organization to speak for them. I would much rather speak directly with the faculty through shared governance than to have a union come in and negotiate for them. But so things had gotten pretty bad, apparently, in terms of the relationships between administration and faculty. This shocked me, and that's one thing that I'm trying to focus on in the future, to restore that kind of a relationship with faculty where we're all working together. I mean, similarly, staff has been upset by some things, some inconsistent decisions and that sort of thing. But even as I say that, we are so understaffed and underfunded that most of our people are extremely overworked, and some things just slip through the cracks. Nobody has the resources to attend to everything they have to attend to. So it's a difficult situation. But if we can streamline operations, if we can get our IT structure, infrastructure in place, if we can revise some policies and procedures and get back to some routine ways of doing things, we can survive this. We can get it done. But it's going to be difficult. Mm. But that was the one thing that confronted me, how things had kind of gotten to the point where everybody was upset, frustrated, I should say.
Where is that union situation now?
They're still negotiating the contract. We have some lawyers, and the union has its representatives. I'm not personally involved in the talks now, but they will come up with something. I hear that the talks are going very well, and that's good. I mean, and I'm not anti-union. I'm just disappointed that someone saw the need to bring them into the university. My philosophy on dealing with people is to be transparent, be truthful, put all the facts on the table, and whether you're the union or the faculty council or the staff council or the media or whomever, if you're dealing with the facts that I have and I can't explain to you my decision, then I've got a problem. Mm-hmm. I should probably rethink my decision. So yeah, I'll bring anybody around the table who wants to talk, but that does add to the time it takes to get things done. Mm. And some managers are so eager to get things done that they skip the process of even talking to people they need to talk to. And if you skip that process, that is generally when the people you should have been talking to bring somebody else in to talk on their behalf.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
So I'd much rather just get it on the table and start talking and sharing information.
The light has come on. Let's take a break. Let's come back for the second half.
Okay.
Lincoln University and JCTV are now on fiber optic cable courtesy of CenturyLink and Prism TV. Uninterrupted high-quality Prism TV delivers JCTV to Jefferson City and Columbia on Channel 99. Big thanks and much appreciation to CenturyLink, their staff, and Prism TV from your friends at Lincoln University and JCTV. Jefferson City Access Television for Jefferson City and Columbia. Now on Prism TV, Channel 99.
Hello, we're back. We're visiting with Dr. Michael Middleton. He's the interim president of Lincoln University, and we're more than happy to have you here to share with us on JCTV. We were talking about the initiative of the faculty to entertain bringing a union in. Having had that conversation, where are you and where do you think the faculty is relative to that situation? Or have you had that conversation yet?
I haven't had that conversation yet. I mean, they are in talks with our people, and I assume that they, intend to continue discussing it and they will have union representation. And if that's the case, we will, of course, engage in that process. I just find it disappointing that we find ourselves in that position. I don't expect them to, drop their effort.
A legal question.
Yeah.
Unionization. There's this big discussion about unions and union dues.
Mm-hmm.
So, faculty bringing the union in, does that mean that there will be union dues that would be expected to be paid by faculty and staff, at least faculty? And what does that mean to individuals who say, I don't want to be a part of the union?
Mm-hmm. Well, if they are certified as the bargaining representative for the group, as I understand it, those who pay dues are the ones who will be essentially footing the bill for everybody else. But everybody is going to be bound by the decisions that those who are paying dues make. If you're not paying dues, you're not voting, as I understand it. So I've heard of situations where 5 or 6 people, dues-paying members of the union, are controlling everything for the entire defined membership or bargaining unit, which sometimes causes problems, Plus, I mean, the union, being in the union does impose on you an obligation to cough up some money for dues if you want to have a voice. So it's a complicated situation.
Yeah. You spoke about the financial situation, not only of the institution, but also we find the state is in a similar situation. How stressful is that, not only to the decision makers, but faculty and staff who receive the brunt of that financial crisis?
I think it's stressful to both. But we have been dealing in this state for a number of years with the effects of the tuition caps that the state legislature imposed on all universities and declining state revenue, which means declining dollars allocated to higher education. And now we're all faced with declining student enrollment, which also means less revenue because you have fewer paying students. So our resources in higher education generally, in Missouri and in most states, in actual buying power, have been declining for years and years. We've managed over the years to find ways to be more efficient so that we could continue our operations despite those cuts. But some of the ways we have become more efficient is, put off maintenance of our buildings, not give our faculty and staff salary increases that they desperately need, not invest in new programs. So the things that make the universities great, very few universities have been doing in the past several years because of lack of resources. So for the administrator who is trying to be progressive and implement a vision, the lack of resources just makes it very difficult to do that. For the faculty and staff and program leaders within the university, it's just a matter of of having no assurance that anything is going to change. You know, they're doing more work, not getting salary increases, operating in a society where the cost of everything is going up. So they're falling behind in terms of their lifestyle, their ability to do what they need to do. So it's a tense and stressful situation. And then when you have, as Lincoln did and as the University of Missouri did and others, this last budget cycle, people had to lay people off. That's scary when you lose your job. And I don't think anyone has a plan for avoiding that in the future. The process that we use in this state for funding higher education. For example, the legislature this year allocated $2.5 million to Lincoln to contribute to securing some matching funds from the federal government. The feds will give us $7.1 million for our ag and research program, extension and research programs. But a condition of receipt of that $7 million is that we match it with our own money. We haven't had the ability to match that money for as long as anyone can remember. The state did give us $2.5 million, so we can use that to get $2.5 million out of the feds. Good deal. And we're very grateful to the state for providing that. But the way the state's budget is structured, there's always the possibility that the governor, if revenues aren't up to where they are expected to be, can just withhold that 2.5. Well, that makes it very difficult to run the university. When you withholding that 2.5 means $5 million that we won't have. Mm-hmm. So how do you plan? How do you lay out a plan for next year? If you rely on having that $5 million and then it's lost, so you can't hire anybody, you can't really lay out any detailed plans for use of that money. Or you do nothing, and then if by chance you do get it, you're scurrying around trying to figure out how to spend it in the next year. So there are just structural issues that make it very difficult to deal with this budget situation that we have. And that's just one piece of federal money that we're talking about. It makes it very, very, very difficult to reassure people and to effectively plan long-term activities for the betterment of the university. But you just struggle through it, and you make it work.
Now you spoke a little earlier about your desire to beef up, improve development.
Yes.
And I would assume the benefit of that would be that shortfall you may get from the state, if you had reserve that you've raised, you could go ahead and move and do what you need to do.
Yeah.
But that actually means some real feet on the ground making that happen.
Which costs money. You got to invest in the staff and software and travel and all that. You got to spend some money to make some money, I should say. And development is not the solution. The state provides a significant amount of money, despite the fact that it's not where I think it should be, and in what you get for the money, it appears, I think, that the state's contribution has been declining. I don't know about Lincoln at the moment, but I know at Mizzou, the state used to provide about 70% of their general operating budget. back 20 years ago. They're providing about 18% now. So the proportion of the resources that are provided by the state is declining. But still, 18–20% of your budget is a good chunk of money that you're not going to replace with contributions. I mean, I think what would it take to endow 20% of Lincoln's budget, invest and just generate that annually, because that comes every year.
Right.
But development can pay for some things that need to be paid for. One time, fixing up of a building, we find a donor who is interested in nursing. We need a nursing facility desperately. If we can find somebody who can provide the funding to build that building, we got an outstanding nursing program, recognized everywhere as outstanding. That's a one-time thing, except for maintenance on the building. If we had someone who could, put their name on the building and give us the money to build it, so we just need people out there looking for that kind of help. Even something so small as having all of our graduates, we need to build a culture of giving. Every Lincoln graduate who has a bank account with the ability to set up an automatic transfer of money, why not have everybody transfer $10 a month to Lincoln? Automatic, comes out of your bank account. Well, if you get enough people giving $10 a month to Lincoln, you can build up a good chunk of money. And some people can do 50. Some people can do 100. Whatever you can do. We need a campaign to have people look back and recognize what Lincoln has done for them and do something for Lincoln. And do it for a lifetime. If you get a 25-year-old to start giving $10 a month, I mean, I would say put $10 a month in your 401k and put $10 a month in Lincoln. You do that from the time you're 25, by the time you're my age, you've built up a pretty good chunk of money for yourself and for Lincoln. And you won't miss it. But we just need to build that attitude. But before we can do that, we've got to clean up people's perception of higher ed generally, and Lincoln in particular.
As an alumnus of the university, I've observed over the years, and it is not unknown, Lincoln University has never been funded to the level in which it should. And the only reason that I have been able to come up with is it's a historically black institution. We do know racism does exist. Now you go to the Capitol over there and say this is why you're not doing this, you find all kind of excuses as to, well, no, that's not the case. But we all know that Lincoln University has never been funded at the level it should be funded. But one of the things here is that a university has to be in the posture from the janitor all the way to the president to say that we are recruiting an alumnus when that freshman comes on that campus the first day. Because so many students, and I've heard it over the years, attending alumni conventions and so forth, people show up to the convention, has never been back to Lincoln University. Say, I would never give back because if something happened 50 years ago, 50 years ago, that some staff person said something or did something to that student, and they held it for 50 or 60 years, which is insane, but that's the reality.
That's the reality. No, it's you got to treat people right. You got to make them love their university. You got to make them think of it as home. You got to have a good alumni association that cultivates that kind of love for the institution. And you got to have everybody on staff and every faculty member treat people with the utmost respect and dignity, so that they do not have that bad taste in their mouth when they leave. But on the question of Lincoln's funding, I mean, I've heard it said that Lincoln has never been funded as it should be. But I have to tell you, I've heard that from every university in the state. I used to say that at the University of Missouri. So I don't know that there is a disparity that you can really attribute to racism. Although I suspect that there is an attitude amongst some in the state, and this is why I talked about changing the perception of Lincoln, that Lincoln is an underperforming school for black folks, that is not deserving of any extra support. You know, if there's a formula there for distributing the money, we'll do it by the formula, but that's it. Nothing special. We're not going to help them, you know, let them dry up, whatever. And I don't doubt that there is some racial aspect to Lincoln's underfunding, but what I'm saying is that everybody's underfunded now. But what we need to do is make sure Lincoln is performing better than expected. And in that regard, you know, this open admissions characteristic that we have. I mean, I'm all for giving everybody an opportunity to achieve a higher education. I think that's what our founders wanted. I think it's very beneficial to everybody in society that folks have an opportunity. But if that is our mission, then it really is unfair to expect us to perform in terms of retention rates and graduation rates and all those standard measures of performance at a university, knowing that many of our students are just severely underprepared for university work. So if we're going to have an open admissions policy, then to the extent that performance on those traditional measures of success drive funding decisions, we are setting ourselves up for failure.
Right.
You know, you know, if a university can fill their student bodies with high-performing, high ACT, well-exposed young graduates of high-performing high schools, those young people are ready for college. But if you're talking about taking kids from severely underfunded, underperforming urban and rural schools in Missouri and giving them a meaningful college experience, you simply can't expect the same level of performance by those measures, by those standard measures, as you get from the schools without open admissions. So there's an issue there. Mm-hmm. It's about the mission of the institution and having some realistic measures of success in performing that mission.
Mm. Well, you know, that was one of my questions that I was going to ask relative to your opinion on the open admission policy of the university. It sounds like you're not opposed to the mission, but the formula that is being used to fund and judge the success ratio has to be looked at.
Has to be looked at. I mean, and what I've seen is all the universities are measured by the same performance funding standards, you know, and that doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
You know, a few years ago, I was doing a little research and found where it had been shown that approximately 16% of all blacks attending college enroll in one of 85 historically black institutions. And this means that 84% of blacks who are attending college attend majority institutions. I guess my question to that, if 16% of blacks attending colleges are attending historically black institutions, and looking at the success ratio of those individuals who graduate from historical black institutions, they're doing quite well, and they move on to do quite well. So it's the preparation of these students coming out of historical black institutions have basically proven to be fairly well done. How do HBCUs and how are they expected to compete against majority institutions for adequate funding when, if you look at the success ratio of blacks coming out of majority institutions and historical black institutions, you know, there has to be some parity somewhere. You know, but you're expecting institutions to generate successful people, but you're not adequately funding those institutions.
Yeah, you're not, and you are, and if the HBCU is an open admissions school, you're filling up, you're populating your student body with young people who aren't prepared for that kind of development. No question, HBCUs do very, very well with very, very well qualified students. And they provide a wonderful experience, a comfortable experience, an experience where students see people like themselves in successful positions. It's a great motivator. My daughter went to Tuskegee. She loved it. She thrived at Tuskegee. So much so that she was able to come back to Mizzou and do well in the law school. HBCUs provide something that a lot of black students really need and really enjoy, if they're ready for college. But the fact that they, like Lincoln, and I'm not certain about all others, but if they're open admissions, then if you look at the data, they're not going to have the same high graduation rates, placement rates, et cetera. And that feeds the perception that there's something wrong with that school. You know, I'm not going there. You know, if I go to this white school, you know, they've got a 80% graduation rate, so I'm more likely to get out if I go to. So you're not looking at the data and analyzing it properly. And if you're considering that kind of data in funding the school or supporting the school as an alumnus or a donor, you're looking at the wrong data. You're not recognizing that there's a different mission here. You know, yeah, both my brothers-in-law, all four of them have been very successful as Lincoln grads. You're a successful Lincoln grad. So there's no doubt that if you come here and you know what you're doing and you've got a reasonable, if you're reasonably prepared for college level work, our faculty will challenge you and make you grow and prepare you for success. But I was in a conversation right before I came over here where they were discussing a student who, I heard the words, he can't read or write. I said, wait a minute, he's a student here at Lincoln and he can't read or write? Well, I think he may have had some sort of a disability, learning disability, and because it was a group of people who support folks with disabilities. But if we've got students who can't read or write at Lincoln, then we need resources to provide them the support they need to become successful.
Right.
And we don't have those resources. So we got to clarify our mission, and we've got to make certain that somebody is giving us the resources to serve the students that we have so that we can give them a chance for success.
Politics have played a tremendous game on the population. You want the goodies that taxes pay for, but you don't want to pay taxes. And it's not so much, I don't think, is you don't want to pay taxes, but the legislature have caught hold of that game that I'm not going to raise your taxes, and so they get elected, and as a result, schools are not being funded, government entities are not being properly funded, so on the back end, you receive what you pay for. And so Lincoln University, majority white students. So it's a historical black college, majority white student body, but yet the funding is not there to even prepare them. So there's a tremendous game, and I don't want to get off on that.
No, it's a game.
You know,
actually, the student body is, I guess it is a majority, but it's closer to 50-50.
It's closer than
the faculty is majority.
Right. It's
white.
closer now than it used to be.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
But that's a tremendous game that politicians play. No one wants to pay taxes, but they want the benefit of taxes.
Yeah, I have I don't like taxes either when they're not used for the benefit of the larger society. But I'm going to assume that, you know, we need education, we need decent highways, we need to fix the bridges, we need decent health care. And we need to have some sort of a safety net for people who simply can't survive without it. I'm willing to pay taxes for that.
Right.
But that's just me.
You know? I think that's most people.
Yeah.
I think that's most people. But that's a game that the politicians play.
Yeah, they do play that, and they've been playing it for a long, long time.
And unfortunately pitting people against each other.
Yeah.
Coming to a close of our interview here. Lincoln University will never be capable of doing the job that we really need the institutions to do for both black and white students. So as we look at what alumni need to hear from the president of the institution about where we go from here, the role that they can play, the pressure that they can place in places that it needs to be placed. What do you say to alumni and the general population who cares for Lincoln University?
That we need your support. That Lincoln has a long history, has a legacy, has a mission. That history, that legacy, that mission won't change dramatically. But if Lincoln is to survive, it has to come to grips with the fact that it is a historically black institution, not a black institution. When it was a black institution, it was a black institution because blacks couldn't go anywhere else. That day is over. And as much as the predominantly white institutions have had to adjust to their identity being changed as a result of desegregation, I think Lincoln has got to adjust to its identity being modified somewhat as a result of the influx of non-black students. That's not a bad thing. I think HBCUs can maintain their traditions. They can expose a larger group of young people to those traditions. There are rich traditions in our culture that are expressed in our institutions. The white student who wishes to benefit from that experience and that culture, you're welcome to come, and we'll give it to you and prepare you for success as diligently as we prepare our African American students for success. But we need students, and we shouldn't worry so much about what color they are. If they're students and they want to be here, we need to provide them an enriching experience at Lincoln University. That may be difficult for some to adjust to. And there are many who may disagree with me. You know, many who may want to return to the good old days of segregation. I don't know, but it just seems to me that we've come to a point where while it is important and not to forget our history and not to forget our role as a historically black college or university, that we not let that interfere with our fulfilling our responsibility as a university. We are here to create and disseminate knowledge to young people who want to better their lives. And it shouldn't matter to us too much the racial composition of our student body, so long as it's inclusive of everybody. We ought to be reaching out for more and more international students. This globe is a lot more than black and white. We need to really become an institution that has some global connections, because that's the world that our grandchildren are going to be inheriting, and they need to have some exposure and connection to that world as well.
Well, thank you for joining us for this conversation. I appreciate you accepting our invitation, and we wish you only success in this endeavor.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, we have been having a conversation with Dr. Michael Middleton, the interim president of Lincoln University, and as I said, we hope him Godspeed and only success. We'll see you next time. God bless.